Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to NIP versus Pulse Esports. This was delayed today, and this is now the final day, the fourth day of the US Challenger Series number 18. I am Pulse, and I'm joined by Stress once again. Hello.
Hello, good to be back. It's a nice change to actually be casting so many days in a row. It keeps me on my feet, keeps me busy, so I'm glad to be back.
Just for the first series though, and then we just get rid of you and put you in a box somewhere. So,
yeah, you don't hear from me again, if you remember from yesterday. That just doesn't happen anymore.
But we are going to go on to less awkward things, such as the band champion. Thresh, Caston are going to be the next couple, before Pulse take a long time to wait for the next band.
Yeah, they are waiting around, and I am behind on time in the stream, as we can't fit all of us into the lobby, unfortunately, since we need our lovely spectator and production in there alongside Pulse. So I'm going to be a little bit further behind, but nothing surprising yet out in the bands from Thresh and Cassidy.
Yeah, the follow-up is Lee Sin, and Lee Sin against most challenger teams, you can probably say, well, someone on this challenger team is probably competent with Lee Sin, and will therefore be a good ban out. Yesterday we saw Lee Sin being played top lane, and I'm not sure how much I liked it. I'm not sure what your opinion is on Lee Sin top lane, but it doesn't necessarily offer what most top laners do, and it's basically, Lee Sin top lane is always to me being, I'm better than you, and I'm going to try and outplay you.
I mean, Lee Sin top lane to me always just seems like the damage and split pushing in it means that you really want to try and win lane as fast as possible and then push down turrets as fast as possible. We're not going to see it in this game, so it's not too much of a thing anymore, but we will see where the rest of the bands go.
Absolutely. So Yasuo is going to be the follow-up, and Yasuo has been banned out from time to time. It's more like an oddball pick at the moment. I still haven't seen a game Stress where Yasuo has completely swung it in the team's favour. Unless it's the other way, because I don't know, Yasuo to me hasn't had a huge impact, but people are still finding their feet with the champion.
I mean, we've seen games where I believe there was a Malphite Yasuo combo in LCS,
yeah.
Or it was another attempt was with Trundle, since you get that small displacement off the middle. I think he seems to be so strong in lane though that it can be quite difficult to just work around Yasuo. I know I spoke to quite a few people when I was over in Los Angeles, that basically were like, yeah, we kind of have trouble making him not win lane. So yeah, he's pretty strong, not too surprising, but I have noticed that Kikis has picked up that Vi, which I think is a good pickup here.
Yep, and in response will be Kayle, which makes perfect sense, because if Kayle's open and you've just picked Vi, then why not pick Kayle?
Yeah, that's pretty much how that works, and especially with Kha'Zix alongside, I'm going to assume that Kha'Zix is going to be in the jungle for Amin. I'm pretty sure I've seen Amin play Kha'Zix jungle when he was on Super Hot Crew, if I'm not mistaken. So nothing all that surprising. Kha'Zix finds his feet in the jungle. A little bit better from the distribution of gold from the new from the additions to the items, the new passives that are on the items as well for the spirit items.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more common now in the jungle. So the follow-up will be Leona and Renekton. That has now been locked in. Leona again is just finding herself as one of the most picked supports kind of out of nowhere. Since kind of the introduction of the unconventional supports like Annie, and then it kind of transitioned away from more of the Fiddlesticks picks into more conventional picks again, into Leona and Thresh, and now we're just seeing Leona all the time.
Yep, yeah, just seeing a lot of those aggressive supports. You don't really have the passive lanes quite so much anymore. There was a Soraka run with Urgot. I think that might have been CLG running that. I can't quite remember off the top of my head over in NALCS. So there is still room for some defensive supports, but certainly the more aggressive bottom laners right now seem to be the ones that take control of the game. As a lot of the meta game right now is all about winning the lower half of the map, 3v3s, and any engagements that are in the lower half of the map, and kind of just leaving the top half of the map to get on with what they do.
Yeah, and then you have the top laners who just want to ignore the game, and then you just have the middle lane and the junglers. And that's what can often happen. But the next couple picks from NIP will be Mundo and Jinx, and through a lot of the Challengers series, we've often seen Mundo and Shyvana left open and just no one decide to pick it, and also we've not had a last ban, which I didn't even notice until now, but I didn't even comment on it.
Yeah, I wonder whether that's a spectator issue, because
Yeah,
I
I'll
don't
ask.
see that these teams would have not banned something out. But I mean, if there was a ban there, I would kind of expect it maybe to be Shyvana, but Shyvana and Mundo have seen a couple of counters in lane. We've got the Trundles that are appearing, and people are just realizing that you can kind of, as long as you pick a similar champion, you can kind of ignore them and they'll trade evenly and not become monstrous. Whereas if you try and dive them and feed them kills, they can actually outscale each other, and you can end up with a really tanky, really powerful top laner that is so difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and we've had a Gangplank lock-in, which I'm going to assume is a placeholder, because I haven't seen Gangplank for quite some time, and I'm just going to mess Kickers about that. So, just waiting on the last pickup from NIP, but they are hovering over the Alistair, which would be great to see.
Yeah, Alistair is again another champion that's seen a little bit of resurgence. I want to say, I'm pretty sure it was Pumandu was playing Alistair over in the OGN finals, which SKT K actually ended up pretty much convincing everybody that they're still as good as SKT have always been. So, yay, SKT bringing back Alistair and showing us exactly how to work in lane. In fact, that was in a really nice team composition against the Yasuo, where they ran Nunu, Karthus, Alistair, and the amount of peel and zoning potential that those three champions had together was actually insane, because nothing was going to get through to their backline. He swapped off Alistair and onto Annie. I'm behind, so we'll see whether he's locked in.
Yeah, he did actually end up locking it in. I'm a bit sad that he didn't lock in the Alistair, because it has great potential.
Who
And,
knows? He may be playing Alistair top lane, unlike like you were.
well, it sort of worked. I mean, I've been trying AP Alistair mid lane recently, Stress. It hasn't really worked out the way I wanted it to.
Apparently, Pulse is having a party in his
Yeah, man, it's
in
like,
his
I'll
house.
be right back.
So I think for the next couple of minutes or so until Pulse is has stopped having a house party, I think we can talk a little bit about those team compositions. We've got quite a damage heavy composition coming out here from I believe it's NIP were on the red side for this game. So Kha'Zix in the jungle is a very damage oriented champion, as you'd expect. Gets the resets in the team fights and pretty much just lays down as much damage on one target as possible. Kayle is very similar actually in the way that you apply the Q damage, then Lich Bane, and most of the time your target's either dead or nearly dead from that rotation. So it's one of those things that we'll see as this game goes on, how the team of Pulse can counteract that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you were aware that the GP was actually a Sivir, but it's
Okay.
going to be the Sivir. And the Annie, again, I'm not sure if you spoke about this because I was briefly AFK, but the Annie and, of course, the Jinx lane is one of the more common bot laners where you can just stack the CC, makes it very difficult for people to get away from you.
Yeah, that's I hadn't quite got to that bit, but that was one of the things that I'm sure was going to come up. So yeah, it was a placeholder ban, so they have picked up Sivir there as I guess you can kind of expect that. I mean, Lucian would be another alternative, but Sivir is certainly a commonly picked AD carry in the recent meta.
Okay, so 55 seconds remaining, and we've got some pretty solid team lineups. So, looking at the team of Pulse, they've got some pretty decent disengage and re-engage. Well, not so much disengage, but by having Sivir, you basically have on the hunt. When you get to the roaming phase, when you get into the team fight dances, then Sivir just allows you to choose the fights that you want, and then you have the Leona to jump in on top of that with the Solar Flare, and then the follow-up from the Sultan Battery, and then you have the front line of Renekton, and you have Poke. It's such a control-y team composition.
Yeah, there's a really I kind of am a little not confused at this team composition out of Pulse, but it doesn't quite match up with what I'd expect from this team composition. Their mid lane choice for Nidalee is more siege oriented, whereas the rest of their team is looking for that solar flare into actually pushing down a turret fairly quickly. I guess Sivir is quite a siege heavy champion as well, but we'll see how that works out as we go on into the game.
Yep, and we are going to jump to a quick commercial break, and when we get back, we'll be in the first game of this best-of-3 semi-finals of Ninjas in Pyjamas versus Pulse eSports. We'll see you soon. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the last and final day of the EUS Challenger Series number 18. This is the semi-finals currently with NIP versus Pulse eSports, and the winner of this game will go on to the finals, which will be just a little bit later. But this is a best of 3 series. I am Pulse, and I'll be joined by Stress.
Hello, nice to be here for another best of 3. As you said, we're in the semi-finals. If you want to enjoy our finals even more later, remember you can type !bet into chat. You'll get a link to go over to eSports Venture, where there'll be a Chaos TV referral code. So if you deposit €20 minimum, you'll actually get a bonus 10% and an extra €5 on top of that. So you'll get about €27 for depositing 20, and you can bet on our grand finals, which are coming up later today. So make sure you head over and do that. But we are into game number 1 of this best of 3, and this should be a rather exciting series.
Yeah, absolutely, and I didn't catch the other NIP games, but it looks like they are definitely on top form. Pulse have just looked incredibly good, usually don't get as far as they have this tournament, so we'll see how they face down NIP.
Yeah, you saw Elendix looking for the Zenith Blade there. Mithy's already got the stun charged up, so they do have to be a little bit careful in that bottom lane.
Yeah, and it's going to make it very difficult just to try and even get anywhere close, and Miffy's already being very aggressive. Elendix is going to follow up. We saw this yesterday. Warlighter just throwing out these auto attacks, but Freeze is punishing them so incredibly hard, and Miffy's just aggressive positioning has already pushed Warlighter out of lane.
Yeah, that is not a good start here for Pulse, being pushed out in lane already. She's going to be forced to go back and has to buy a couple of potions to try and survive that lane, but I mean, Mithy and Freeze have just been working together for so long as a duo bot lane that they are so in tune with each other on when they're engaging and knowing when not to. And in the early game, that's already paying dividends.
Yeah, and yesterday we saw how good Elendix was at landing those clutch Zenith Blades into those Solar Flares. He was often landing on like 3 different people and also getting the stun. But against this bot lane, they're just not having the same results. Elendix is getting the right Zenith Blades, but he can't engage because Warlight has already been pushed out.
Now, something we saw yesterday up in the top lane was Jokies actually struggle a little bit against the Karma pick from Dark Passage. This time, Zoro on Dr. Mundo is a far more standard lane matchup, so I wouldn't expect to see Jokies really get a little bit behind as he did yesterday, because this should be far more familiar to him, as Renekton and Mundo have been picked fairly consistently.
Yeah, much more standard lane matchup. Elendix is going very aggressive as Kickers is coming in from around the side. He lands the auto attack onto Freeze, but doesn't manage to go any further.
Yeah, not quite able to get much from that gank. Barrier was used out from Freeze, so that is a good start for them. In the earlier engagement, Warlighter didn't actually use Flash or Barrier, so we'll have that available for the next time they go aggressive, but they do just have to be a little bit careful, as you've already seen the stuns coming out from Mithy, and it's a little bit dangerous to go up against an Annie lane with a Leona because it's somewhat of a skill matchup. It's pretty much whoever lands a stun on the AD carry first and gets the most damage off can really start to take control of that lane.
Yeah, but at the moment, because Wooliter is only level 2 against this lineup, now that the creeps are pushing in, they're going to have to hang back. But they have this issue where Leona's strong and she can initiate, but Seve really can't do too much on top of that because Freeze will straight up outtrade Wooliter.
And now Armin is really looking to go aggressive in the jungle. One of Vi's weaknesses is getting out-traded early, and Kha'Zix is certainly good at doing that.
Yeah, smites away that Wraith, and now Nuke coming in from around the side. NIQ looking to react as well, but Kicker's brought incredibly low. It's going to make it very difficult for him just to clear out his jungle. And Amin is just going to make Vi have a tough day. Like, he doesn't have anywhere else to really be going. Now that Vi's being pushed out into the top side of the jungle, he knows he won't be counter-ganked, but he's not too keen on going to the bot lane. The call was made that there's too many creeps, and he's going to go ahead and take the golems first.
Yeah, it was pretty smart there. Armin thought he had the ability to go there. Wooliter had already started to reposition in lane as well, but pressure already from Armin is going to hinder Vi a fair amount. They've got to be careful that Armin doesn't start taking too much of the jungle, because Vi really doesn't want to be counter-jungling because of how she trades in the jungle. If you can't trade, it's a really bad idea to be in your opponent's jungle, and if your opponent's taking your jungle too, that's a tricky situation to be in.
Yeah, and Kikis is finding it pretty difficult to find himself a gank, because in the mid lane it's NIQ and Nidalee, not the greatest of gank potentials until you hit like the execute damage of level 6, then you need to start grinding down your opponents, and Nukeduck's going to be winning that lane regardless because he's Kale versus Nidalee. That's kind of just how the matchup goes. Top lane, Renekton's pushing in, that's fine, it's more of like a farmy lane because Mundo wants to be farming out of it while Renekton wants to be pushing him around, and the bot lane is just well, one pushed up and two slightly behind, so they're going to have to find their own way.
It's also pretty difficult to gank an Annie when they're at their own turret because of even pre-6 Incinerate. Yes, the stun duration has been decreased, but even getting locked down under a turret in the early game for 1.5 or 1 second is far too long for these champions before you've got the resistances to take that damage. So it's so difficult right now for Kikis to find anything on the map, and pretty much he's got to try and farm up until 6. He's trying to counter jungle here though, and I'm not sure he'll be able to.
Yeah, he just places down the walls, and it's heading up to 7 minutes, so the first bus will start respawning, so maybe that's what these guys are trying to just make sure that they know the position of the enemy jungler. Kicker's going to be taking away that Wraith, so takes 1 for 1 currently on those Wraith steals. Top lane though, Joku's has found himself 0-0, Dominus has been popped, but it doesn't quite go the right way.
Yeah, that has to be the least risky, actually stun lands in the bottom lane, but not enough to follow up on, but that has to be the least risky counter jungling ever. Ward over and then maximum range smite off the big Wraith. So he was successful in counter jungling, but not as aggressive as he'd have liked to have been, maybe.
Yeah, something you don't see too much from a vibe, but you know, when it's as easy as that, then we can see some counter jungling. And I keep going to be just about taking the blue buff, and Kicks will be taking that one up. So the red buff has spawned from Amin. He's going to find himself in the bottom half of the map right now, and the lane is still pushing in. So over the board, NIP have a slight advantage, but it's not too much at this stage.
And we're getting to that point where a couple of the champions are reaching the points in the game where really their potency will start to become apparent, because Armin has hit level 6, so I'm going to assume that he's got the reset on... he's got the reset on Leap, as you'd expect on a jungle Kha'Zix here, so when he does gank, he's going to be able to reset, but Elendik's taking a lot of damage in the bottom lane, and the bottom lane will get potency as well at 6, because the Super Mega Death Rocket becomes available, as does Tibbers, and that is massive burst damage.
Yeah, as long as they can just land the CC and Kha'Zix find themselves just kind of close to the bottom lane, then they're probably going to die. Meanwhile, the Pulse lineup of bottom lane, they have the Solar Flare, they have decent disengage if they decide to jump on the turret, so it can be difficult to try and dive that. Plus, the extra resistances from Eclipse from Elendix means he's not necessarily a target unless they get him almost instantly. And Wooliter, he's probably a more squishy target, he doesn't have a natural escape. Flame Chompers can make it a little bit difficult to escape from that turret dive, but it might be something that they can jump in and jump out, because, as you mentioned, Leap has been evolved first.
Yeah, and one thing that Freeze and Mithy have done very well, and it's something that is a sign of a very confident bot lane that have worked together for a long time is Freeze has been stepping forward, using the rockets to harass down Woolita and Elendix. Now, that can be very dangerous against the Leona because of the counter-engage potential. But because they've worked together for so long, Mithy and Freeze know when they're available to do that, because Mithy will have his stun charged up. You can see Mithy's just moving forward, takes the ricochet a little bit there, but until Mithy has stun, they won't go forward to harass with the rockets, but they're keeping their opponents so low in lane that as they hit 6, even if they counter-engage, there's going to be likely a double kill in favor of NIP.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to see Kickers find out that his girls were counter-jungled from the very start of the game, and not really getting too much gold from that. So mid lane, NIQ has finally hit that level 6 regional, past the level 6, has now got the Cougar available, the Cougar form, but still Kale's lane dominance, the kind of more classic bully that we've seen through many different seasons, is making it quite hard for him to get anywhere close.
Now, let's take a look at this top lane. Very even on both sides. Neither of them even having to go back yet. So these top laners, as you'd expect, are just hanging out doing what they do in top. And Kikis is also doing what he does, because Vi's reached that point where you can start taking Dragon down pretty quickly. So that's a really nice pickup there, that they don't let Armin onto that Dragon, because Kha'Zix is another champion that can do Dragon fairly quickly.
Yeah, it's usually the Kha'Zix you see going for that first, but, I mean, Kickers didn't have anything else to be doing. He can't really gank lanes. He wants to not get counter-jungled by Kha'Zix, and they just knew his kind of relative position because they had the ward, in fact, the one that stole away the Wraith before, so that might have been what ticked them off about Ammon's position. So a ping comes up onto Nuke in the middle lane, probably just took a Javelin, I think he did.
Yeah, taking those javelins is not good for your health, but we'll see how that continues. As Nuke will have the heal available from Kale as well, so not too bad. Kale with the blue buff is a very consistent laner. Armin is looking for the gank here. Can they land the slow here as 760 goes forward?
NIQ walks forwards, turns into Cougar, jumps out, takes a significant chunk of damage away from him, but neither of these junglers have been too successful this game.
Yeah, Nidalee is an incredibly difficult champion to gank and gank for, and you can see, yeah, sorry, that low health ping always throws me off.
Yeah.
So many Nidalee traps have been littered around this area, but Nidalee has such good mobility that it's difficult to gank her, and not a lot of early game follow-up damage, so it's difficult to gank without landing a massive spear to begin with. So that's why you see a lot of mid laners picking up Nidalee, because just of how consistent she is in lane. Yeah,
and kind of mitigates a lot of what Vi can do, but now they're looking for this 3-man counter jungle. Vaultbreaker doesn't quite connect onto Amin as he just kind of wanders out. His Void Assault was used, but he's not in such a bad shape, and the buffs aren't up either, so not something they have to really worry about.
And because neither jungler really has had an effect on this early game, Vi's been able to offset a lot of the counter jungling that Armin did very early in the game. And that's going to allow Vi to scale somewhat better into this game. Normally, a Kha'Zix would like to pick up kills early on. And you can see Kikis now even feeling confident to head up towards this top lane. Does have a Sultan Battery available. Will they be able to take down 0-0? Because he's got a lot of health.
Yeah, he also has the Sadism if he needs it. Kikis charging up the Vault Breaker, looks for it, doesn't quite land it. Flash comes out. And 0-0 quite antsy in the top lane, but for good reason.
You can see Armin's damage there in the middle lane. Just avoids the spear, but one thing we haven't really talked about though is 0-0's teleport, and normally the first teleport of the game is an incredibly important moment, and that tends to be around the dragons, but because Pulse managed to take it down without really NIP being able to answer because of Kha'Zix having to recall, teleport just hasn't been utilised now, and we're 12 minutes in. Normally you'd have seen the first one out by now, but 0-0 hasn't even gone back to buy yet.
Yeah, so Amin again steals another Wraith. I think we're at what, 2-1 in the jungle camps, and Nuke almost taking another Javelin. So let's take a look at some of the item builds. Some of these guys have actually gone back and come back into lane. Another ping comes up from mid lane. That's really concerning. Like every time you hear a ping, and it's going to happen a lot when you have a Nidalee in the game, then you always look at the lane and get put off your point. But the first pickup will be the Nash's Tooth, which is something we've actually seen quite a lot from Kales, even back in Season 3.
Yeah, not surprising at all. Normally it tends to be Nash's Tooth into Lichbane, and you just spike somebody with a Q, auto attack with Righteous Fury on, and just chunk through their health, because you get the added Lichbane damage, the extra masteries damage, the basic attack damage, the Righteous Fury damage, and you get the added damage from Nash's Tooth. So Nash's Tooth is the perfect item on Kale.
Yeah, it's a lot of like hidden damage that you just can't calculate all at the right time. So Nukduk just putting down the forward ward, just like Nidalee was doing before, more for the javelins than anything. 2 minutes left on the dragon. We'll see if these guys try and contest that. Last time we just saw the stealth dragon taken away from Kickers, which is basically what, or the most that Pulse could really hope for, because they don't want to really try and head off NIP in a straight-on engagement that early onto the game. But now they might have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the very important moment. Is I really would like to see NIP get a little bit more ward control around the lower jungle area and around Dragon, because especially with that teleport available on Zoro, who has now bought, so has the Sunfire Cape and the cloth armor, so he's now considerably tankier for getting down to that bottom lane and teleporting into a fight. The only thing he's got to be careful of is that Jokeys doesn't stun him as he teleports, because then it really just nullifies the damage. But here comes fight.
Yeah, they're gonna shoot for the gank. Dominus has been popped into Call the Meek. We'll see how much damage they can offer. Double flash comes out. There's an extra regen from Sadis has been keeping him alive way longer than he should do. Nukduk comes up and he survives, burns 2 flashes.
And that's the difficulty of ganking a Dr. Mundo. It might not be over because Nukduk has stayed around in this top lane and 760 is following him up, so it looks like it could be a 3v2. Kha'Zix is just content to push in the middle lane though.
Yeah, they had another reaction from Nidalee, even though the engagement had stopped, maybe suspecting that NIP would re-engage with Mundo and his newfound confidence with also KO alongside him. But NIQ is just going to find himself back in the mid lane and start farming again. And Kha'Zix is going to take the opportunity to steal away another Wraith.
Going to take away as much of that jungle as possible. Vi has seen him now, so he's going to be a little bit careful.
Yeah, he was waiting over the wall, seeing if he could do some damage to Kickers, but he also saw NIQ heading in, which would be a much squishier and easier target. Red buff has spawned and he's going to jump onto Kickers. Doesn't get the isolation damage just yet. Leaps after the Vault Breaker. NIQ has arrived. The dodge out of the Javelin. Does he have enough damage? First blood has been popped at 15 minutes. Nukduk doesn't even need to react, and Annie comes in from the bot side just in case.
Yeah, good roaming around there by NIP, making sure that they could cover for Armin. That's an incredibly important first kill. Not only was it the first kill on the board, but it also opens up Dragon should they choose it. However, Armin wasn't in position, the Solar Flare comes out.
Miffy caught in that rotation, flash over the wall, another flash from Wooliter. Tib is in response. Armin has arrived though, and the isolation damage is huge. He picks up one, gets the reset. Alenix tagged by Zap, he isn't going anywhere. Armin looking to follow up, lands the voice spikes, constantly slows until he gets underneath that turret. Javelin lands across the wall, and Nukduk is trying to head him off.
Pulse have done a good job of making sure that NIP couldn't Dragon after that. They managed to get quite a bit of damage onto Armin, so he had to go up to Wolves to try and lifesteal away as much health as possible and get the regen from the Void spikes. But it's just so difficult for them to do Dragon when they're that low, and Pulse is doing a good job of throwing out spears and getting as much damage down to prevent them from taking any objectives.
Yeah, and the 1-for-1 trade prevented them from taking Dragon, and at the same time wasn't necessarily detrimental to the team, but it delayed the game, and that's kind of what they need from this. They don't need to be rushing it when they know that if they, apply more kills onto Ammon, he's only going to become scarier and scarier. Joki's in the top lane using Dominus Sadism in response from Zoro, kiting through the minions, and this is going to go down to the wire. Both of these guys can disengage if they want to, but Zoro goes in even deeper. The last auto attack is gonna be the Burning Agony, and Zoro comes out on top.
Oh, and the assist goes to the cannon minions and the rest of the wave that was available there, because they did a surprising amount of damage, and now that will open up potentially the Dragon. Surely they know that is warded. That pink ward does not see that ward. So this is a good engage here for Pulse should they choose to take it. They'd force a teleport out of Mundo, and then they could back off, but they choose not to engage.
It must be on the very edge, because you would think that that would be in range, but apparently not. Wood goes over the wall. Again, another great tag with Zap onto Elendix. And Wooliter has come forwards. It's just kind of the small dance. Ammon's going to be the one leading the charge. And Kickers is still with the rest of his team. Finally, the reaction from 760 from the mid lane. It's going to be 4 versus 4, but Mundo's still in the base. This will quickly turn into a 5 versus 4. Miffy almost going to get dropped, but Vi's already in the death chamber. Warlighter is already underneath his turret. Amin pushes incredibly deep. Jokeys has now come in from the top lane, and 760 does not want to be going 1 versus 4. His team has already disintegrated before his eyes. A 3-for-1 trade.
Yeah, that's a really nice trade for NIP. I think Pulse, if they'd tried to position for an engage earlier, could have burned the teleport and backed off, but the fact that they got caught there is maybe not all over, because Nuketuck gets taken down by 760, and now Zoro is caught behind enemy lines.
Yeah, 3-6, a huge javelin by Jokeys. Amin is still around, but he's not really able to offer too much without just instantly nuking someone down. Zoro, however, just doesn't die. Jokeys, he's already found out, can 1 versus 1, and 760 has flashed out, but he just can't get away from the Mundo. Javelin at point blank range will take him down eventually.
Amin and Freeze were far too low there that they didn't want to engage. I think they could have before Jokeys was able to pop Dominus again. They might have been able to burst 760 down, but they didn't want to jump in on a Nidalee and then get clawed in the face and take a lot of damage there by a big swipe. So they just didn't feel confident engaging, and 2v1 Zoro as soon as Sadism ran out. That's just not a position he wants to be in.
Yeah, it just required a quick reaction takedown, and both of those guys would have died. And that's not something they wanted to put themselves in the firing line with. But that will result in another Dragon going to Pulse eSports and looking very good in this game. Just a slight advantage, but they are in a deficit in kills. But not too bad when it's just centralized with the rest of the team.
We're starting to see the change up of trinkets again here to the greater lens for that sweeper. It's something that we'll see more and more out of teams. Generally, by about 20-25 minutes, you see 3 red trinkets out, and that's to give you the vision control that you really need as these dragon fights become more and more important. I believe that was the second dragon there that's gone to Pulse, so they've done a good job of objective control, but it is still quite a close game. They've started picking up kills more and more, have both teams, after a very slow start. It was 15 minutes was the first kill, and 5 minutes later we're at 10. So they're starting to pick up the pace on the bloodthirstiness of this game.
Yeah, really ramping up the action. But however, in these last couple of engagements, more importantly, the kills have been going to Amin, 2-0 and 3. He's already starting to look quite scary. Spirit of the Blizzard Elder and the Brutalizer picked up. So in the next engagement, or even in the next couple of ganks, Amin's going to be dealing way more damage than you would usually expect him to. Got the level 11 and the second evolution to boot. So let's see exactly what he can do. Warlighter blocking a very telegraphed zap.
Yeah, that one was a nice easy one to read, but he has Spell Shield not available anymore here, and they've cleared out the ward, so here comes Amin into lane, and this could be bad.
Pivot comes down, isolation damage gets one, reset onto Warlighter, auto attack for unseen threat and the slow, but 1 kill is all they're going to take away from this one, and unless Warlighter decides to walk back in, his mid lane and jungle are reacting.
Yeah, they are starting to catch on to this, so they might be able to get there into lane. Kikis does have ult available.
Yep, jumps over the flame chompers and instantly detonates Freeze. Amin is on the retreat. Void Assault has been popped. Javelin comes across and chunks down Miffy. But that was a smart, easy pickup. Kickers is still very low, though. He's got to be very cautious and has to respect Amin's burst.
And up in the top lane, Zoro with the intervention on from Kale will survive through that as he was tanking from the tower. Miffy lands a stun.
Yeah, and Amin jumps in. This is exactly what we were just talking about. Gets one. Warlighter is wailing with the auto attacks and gets the shutdown. Well, that's another kill onto Amin.
Amin, when you got the kill, your E reset and you could leap away. But,
what's the main gimmick of my character?
Not sure Amin was too focused on that. He did have flash available as well, so there was about a second and a half that he really didn't need to die there. It would have been a close one, but a little surprised on that. But you saw good damage come out. That assault and battery from Kikis locking down Freeze in the bottom lane, and that spear came through right before the minion wave hit. I mean, had that been half a second later, it would have chunked the first minion of the wave and done no damage, and Freeze likely would have turned that one around. But that was really nice timing out by Pulse for that gank.
Yeah, indeed. But we rag on Amin, but he's still 3-1-4, and he's well on his way to his second item. He's looking very, very good. And he is one of the larger parts of their team composition. Not only was the KO picked into Vi, which is, well, perfect, because a Vi jumps in with a sword and battery, and then you just intervention the target, and then they just get knocked up and nothing really happens, because you can't dogpile that target, which is kind of the classic playstyle when you have a Vi on your team. But what they also have is a Kha'Zix, a reset champion, and then if he's being focused, intervention comes out, and you can't even deal with that. So KO is performing so many roles in this team just with that one ability.
I would like to thank chat for keeping me on my toes. Armin actually had no mana for that, so that would be why he didn't E away.
Okay, well that makes sense.
It's one of those things that sometimes is a little bit difficult to notice at times. That doesn't, however, explain his lack of using flash, unless it had just come off cooldown. But I'd have to rewind for that.
Yeah, and we're just gonna defend ourselves and say,
I'm just gonna we'll move on. Armin's doing a good job anyway.
Yeah, that's the point we're trying to make, but Solar Flare comes down, and that's not such a good job. Elendix is going to pick up that kill. And I don't even know why we tried. Javelin comes across. Oh, the damage onto Nuke drops into 30%, and the rest of the team will follow. Intervention comes out. Super Mega Death Rocket from the side. NIQ eventually picks up that kill. Miffy has come into the fray, and so has Freeze, but just a little bit too late.
And that's a good set of pickups here from Pulse. They need to use this in an objective-focused way, and they do have a 5-man stack in the middle lane. They will be able to take this tower down as they have another minion wave joining them. So that's a good series of events there from Pulse, and they were already ahead by about 2,000 gold, and that'll take their lead to nearly 3,000, about 2,500 right now.
Yeah, Pulse are looking incredibly good, and over the last couple of weeks they have definitely stepped up their game and become one of the stronger challenger teams in Europe. So Dragon spawning in 30 seconds, and this could well make it their third Dragon of the game, plus a blue buff on top of that. This is just an incredible game so far from Pulse.
Yeah, they're looking very strong here. We saw them be a little bit shaky against Dark Passage, especially in game number 2, where Dark Passage looked very convincing yesterday, but Pulse have done a good job this time, and I think we can certainly look at some of the differences from yesterday. Joki's in that little bit more favourable lane. Okay, he's 0 and 2, but he's kept up in CS a lot better than he did against the Karma yesterday. So Joki's is a lot more comfortable in this game. You look at the mid lane, and 760 is on a very comfortable champion of his in Italy, and 4 and 0 is a good position to be in right now. Ooh, nearly steals away the dragon. Armin will get the smite down on that one. But you can see that Pulse is just feeling a lot more confident in this game.
Yeah, and Zoro is feeling very confident because he just walked up to the blue buff, but doesn't... Actually, he did get it and will be constantly slowing down Jokies with those cleavers. Just walked in, took it, even though Renekton was fighting him. It's like, it's fine, I'm just going to take your blue buff.
Mundo does go where he pleases, so...
and steals what he wants.
Yeah, exactly. Corporate Mundo right there for you. I'm sorry, I think it's a little too early in the day for political and corporate statements here, so...
I don't know, man, it's 6 o'clock. Not bad.
Maybe.
In some countries it's past the watershed, but Armin will be taking away the red buff. He's in good shape. So, the invade continues from Pulse, but Zero is still around, and doesn't have sadism available to him. He might get caught out. The assault and battery comes through, and the javelin, the flash comes down, and the solar flare will miss. Jokies walks through the turret. They're going to try their best to chunk down Zero, but even in the low regions of his HP, he is quite tanky. Freeze comes across, and that was just enough to zone him away from top turret.
Yeah, they took the turret for that. They actually used a fair amount of ultimates, so had NIP been in a position to re-engage, they actually could have done quite well there. Dominus still wasn't available from earlier, and they had used the solar flare. Nuke Tech, however, will take down the turret. Kayle at this point in the game with Lichbane, and of course the rest of the items will start doing quite a bit of damage with the Righteous Fury active against turrets, so not too surprising that they're using Nuke Duck in this split push capacity while the rest of the team is elsewhere. But Pulse certainly are picking up objectives, but they've got to be careful that NIP don't start taking them. You can see the gold lead now down to only around about 1,000, and that's because Nuke Duck has done quite a good job of split pushing so far.
Yeah, and as a result of that split pushing, he's been farming incredibly well. 27 minutes into the game, 260 farm is as good as you can really get on a Kayle, and from that, basically no one can 1v1 him. They need a duelist for Mundo, which is going to be Renekton, his lane partner, but then they need a duelist for Kayle, and that's not going to be Nidalee. She doesn't perform well in that environment, and Armin just loses most of his health.
What Pulse have to be careful of, though, is obviously 760 and Woolita really want to siege for as long as possible outside of turrets, but the problem with siege compositions is hard engage, and Mithy has flash available, has Tibbers available, and that is some of the hardest engage that you're going to get right now in the current meta. And they do have to be careful that Mithy doesn't cut a line in through the side and land a perfect Tibbers onto a couple of members of Pulse, because then they become fairly squishy if they start getting damage from Armin on.
Yeah, they become easy targets for that Predator. And in the bottom lane, again, another push comes in from Pulse. We'll see how strong the seeding potential is, because we spoke about this in Champion Select, or during the break rather, and we had NIQ, of course, with the javelins over the wall, just cutting off a large area, the kind of area denial effect, but they're going to go for this engage. The coin comes out, the flash, Tibbers lands onto 2. Flashes aplenty will get Elendix out. Another javelin over the wall, doesn't quite hit Ammon, but this is still very scary times. However, that big engage is off the board.
It is, and that means Pulse now have freedom for a good few minutes to siege as much as they want. If they can land a couple of spears here from 760, who doesn't have a blue buff, is relying on that Athenes to regenerate. Tibbers takes a spear there and will end his life, but 760 is going to be oh so important at holding back holding NIP behind their own turrets and allowing Woolita to start clearing through the waves and start taking turrets down.
Yeah, they have a lot of poke, but they have to be aware that they have a lot of squishy targets. 3 of those members could easily die, and Armin can very easily die. Those javelins are really mounting up in their damage. Low on mana, but the Athene should keep him in good shape. One of those spears at max range will take them down to like 40% by itself.
Yeah, they're going to be doing a lot of damage. In fact, let's have a look quickly at 760. He's currently got 424 AP, so it looks like it's doing up to about 1,100 damage at maximum range.
But against Mundo, it doesn't do so much, and Satanism is going to be popped. They're going to take another blue buff away from them, and 0-0 is going to be not too happy with that investment, but they're going to back off.
Yeah, and it'll do even less as Mundo finishes the Spear and Visage. Not too surprising that he did obviously go for Randuin's and Sunfire Cape first. They're standard items on Mundo, especially against an AD lane, but they've got to be careful they don't get caught out.
On the hunt use, and Tib is already off cooldown. They've gone for the re-engage. Kickers jumps incredibly deep, jumps over the wall to escape with his life. Intervention used on Nuke Duck to keep himself healthy. Jokies, however, is caught in no man's land. There's the fail flash into the wall. Amin collects another kill onto his belt, and Tibbers has blocked so many spears this game.
That was actually such... let me start that again. At the beginning of that, I thought Mithy had got caught out pretty badly there, but managed to get away with his life. So a good repositioning around by them. And they split Pulse up so much that Pulse really just were easy targets there for Armin to start doing damage. Didn't get all that many kills from it, did Armin, but they managed to split them off and pick off some high priority targets. And a really nice zap came out from freeze to zone Renekton back into the fight, because if he'd have taken that slow, he was certainly dead. He just had to stand and fight and couldn't survive through it.
Yeah, it was kind of unfortunate the flash didn't go the place he wanted to, but he was quite a ways away from that wall regardless. So 0-0 heading back into the mid lane, and now that's a free item, well, 2.5 item, Armin, who is still looking quite scary. He hasn't really fallen off, and he won't fall off because he's Kha'Zix.
Especially now that he's got Last Whisper, he's going to go straight through that armor that Pulse have bought. So they've got to be careful they don't isolate themselves, because if you're doing half of Kha'Zix's job for him already, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, indeed. But at the same time, the longer NIP stay in these sustained standoffs, Nidalee is going to become stronger and stronger, just landing those spears over and over again. Mundo's not going to care too much, but he can't take more than a couple. Dragons are going to be instigated by Pulse eSports, and now the 3-man stack, we'll see what they can do. Miffy gets jumped on, lots of ultimates used, and the intervention is going to block most of it. 0-0 is already wailing against Jokies. Amin jumps in, but he can't quite take him down in one burst, jumps over the wall. There's the reset, double kill for Jinx. Another jump onto Miffy. That's a very late ultimate from Kickers. Jump over the wall from Freeze. He's got the Get Excited passive. NIQ doesn't manage to jump over the wall. He just has to stand there and take his fate. There's the quadra kill for Jinx. That's going to be Freeze picking that up, and the ace, and a very easy Baron call.
Oh man, 0-0 is gonna be the villain in that one and shut down any chance of a penta, because it was there for for freeze, but that was such a good fight by NIP, and I was going to say before they engaged that Pulse really shouldn't have started doing Dragon there. They hadn't chipped down NIP at all, they didn't have the position on all of the members, and to stack like that in the Dragon Pit against Annie and Kha'Zix is not a good idea, and the intervention once again out of Nuke Duck was enough to survive, to allow Mithy to survive through getting engaged upon. And when you burst so much on a support that ends up surviving anyway, you're not going to have a good time in the rest of that team fight against the Kha'Zix.
Yeah, and Miffy was still very healthy. Not only had they burst so much on that support, he was still at like 80% after all that had ended. And it was like, well, now you don't have any bursts, and we have a very scary Amin on our team who's just going to destroy you. Exactly what happened. 9-16, that's completely swung the gold lead in NIP's favour. And now 6-1 and 6 Jinx is also something that they need to start thinking about.
Yeah, they need to have started thinking about that a little bit earlier, because this is a kind of a pseudo reset composition. As yes, you got the resets out of Kha'Zix, but Jinxes get excited, makes it very easy to chase down kills. So as soon as they get one kill, pretty much the rest of the team fight is difficult to stop it going in the way of NIP. You have to shut it down, and we saw a really nice spear come out from 760 into the middle of the fight, which took Armin's health so incredibly low. But the duration, the duration of the cooldown on the spear is so long that by the time you've had one spear into a team fight, the team fight's pretty much over by the time the second one comes out. So they need more damage from somewhere. And Civi's done a good job of farming 306 CS, has pretty much on par items with Jinx, because Jinx has only just picked up those kills, but they need more damage in these team fights.
Yeah, and they're getting themselves now into a confined environment. Last we saw the Dragon Pit, now we're seeing kind of the small bottlenecks of these, the entrances to the main base, and that's not really where the teamfight does very well. Nidalee wants to be in these open environments where she's landing all those auto attacks. They need room to maneuver. They've got a Talisman of Ascension and the Sivir on the hunt for chasing and disengaging, but there's nowhere really to run if you're just running back into your base.
Yeah, that's not the best place to have to run back to. Well, it is the best place to run back to, but not having to run back to it is not a good sign. As clearly things aren't going your way. Zero is so unbelievably tanky right now that it is going to be difficult to kill him. He's had a great game actually, 3-1 and 6. So he's got all of the items that he needs to survive through these team fights, and has been doing so rather magnificently.
And at the moment, they find it quite difficult to... Well, they are definitely sieging, but if they want to go for a team fight, 0-0, I'm not really sure is taking any damage from that turret. He is wandering into it, and there are definitely turret shots hitting him, but I'm not sure it's doing damage.
There's just far too much wave clear from Sivir. It's so difficult to push through the boomerang and the ricochet that she will pretty much one-shot the wave when she uses her abilities, which if you were watching in the bottom lane, she was auto-attacking kind of slow.
Yeah, and, well, we've got the split push from Nuke Duck, but all Sivir needs to do is that combination of abilities, minions go away for another 30 seconds, and then just wanders back to the mid lane and clears that out. So, not really having great success. Another 2 minutes from Dragon, I'm not sure that's going to lure Pulse out of their base, but perhaps Baron will in another couple minutes after that.
Yeah, I mean, unless they can get Pulse out of their base, which is pretty much the ideal place for NIP to take a fight, they are going to have to try and land some kind of flash tibbers, because even though NIP are ahead by 5,000 gold, the item difference is not enough to really say, okay, well, we can dive at any time. And even then, if they do choose to dive, which isn't always the best option, they have to make sure that they get the resets on Armin, and that Armin doesn't die exceptionally quickly.
Yeah, they really need to get that fight rolling, but there's very little from Pulse to keep themselves alive when they have been chipped down. As soon as they are kind of below the 80% mark, as soon as Armin feels he can take them down in one rotation, then that's probably when they will be jumping in. But they don't have all that much poke, because Nuke Duck will most likely be split pushing. Freeze is going to be trying to chip away at the turret, and apart from that, they didn't have long range poke like Nidalee has, so getting them below that threshold is not really on the cards for NIP, and just maybe finding someone when they just step out of base to land a ward might be their best bet.
And something that'll help Armin survive a little bit more is that he's put the third evolutionary point into Void Assault, which some people do actually do. We saw a little bit of a drop off on that on Jungle Kha'Zix at times. It's one of those things that there's a couple of different ways of doing it from the jungle, but the fact that you get 50% reduced damage and a third charge of Void Assault means that he's going to be able to take more damage if he spends more time in stealth.
Yeah, and well, at the moment, well, it's just got a dance around the tower, and Sivia's going to be clearing that out, and the spears are going to be flying through. And NIP are actually going to try and go for this engage. It's going to be Pulse who are going forward. Freeze takes a huge javelin to the face, but a massive super mega death rocket actually gets spell shielded. Kickers has jumped in, but already pushed backwards again. Plasma of Ascension used to disengage. Zoro is so tanky, but he can't say the same thing for the rest of his team. Freeze is trying to cut away from Kickers. Vault Breaker lands. Zoro tries to escape, jumps over the wall with Flash. He should be good. Pops another Banshee's Veil, which are causing one of the major issues. Miffy turns around, not really sure if he wants this to be happening, and Nuke Duck is caught in the wrong jungle. Pulse, their best player, is not really to chase that and to try and get some sort of advantage.
The one member that NIP cannot engage upon is Jokeys right now. There's no point in using the Tibber stun on one member if it's the toughest member of the team, because even Armin can't chunk through Jokeys that quickly. And it meant that as soon as their engage tool was used, Solar Flare hit 4 members of NIP, and they got shut down incredibly quickly because they'd already burst a lot of their cooldowns to try and get a kill, and Pulse result with an inhibitor going down in their favor, so NIP with a pretty big blunder there.
Yeah, like when Pulse get ahead, they can start taking objectives, and the problem with NIP is they just can't take down any of those members. Zero is trying to get someone down, but he is 2 versus 5 with many Banshee Veils up, which were one of the other major factors in that team fight. It was just difficult to land anything. The Super Mega Death Rocket didn't even do anything. It actually got blocked by a spell shield by Sivir.
Yeah, and they just cannot do that. They have to make sure that the Banshees are down. They cannot engage on Renekton because just there's so much wave clear that by the time you already choose to engage, you're already tanking the turret. So it's just far too risky for them to make that kind of play. Kale can only intervention one person.
Yeah, and Lendix's ultimate hit so many people, it was difficult to run away at that point with that 80% slow. But Baron is live, and Pulse are actually moving on to their base, and even at this stage, I'm not sure Pulse can still go toe-to-toe with the team of NIP. It was a great victory, and they took the inhibitor, but in a 5-on-5 fight outside of their base, I'm not sure they can do exactly what they did last time.
Yeah, outside of the base makes all of the difference. You've got far more room to play with, and there's far more chance that you can actually get a good angle on that stun rather than up front where Renekton is just kind of sitting there like, well, if you stun me, I'm probably going to kill you. So it favors NIP far more outside of the base, so they do have to be careful here to Pulse that they don't get too confident from picking up that team fight. That was a great fight for them, but now they just have to kind of wait it out and shove the lanes in as much as possible and make sure they don't get caught.
Yeah, and Amin needs to make sure he doesn't get caught by those spears, but they do have a little bit of healing on their team, but not enough to heal all of it. Miffy down to 55%. And Mundo is hanging around in the bottom lane, just have teleport available to him, but when you get to this stage in the game, spoke before about how the javelins have a large interval before they're thrown during teamfights, and usually they've ended, but when you teleport in, usually the teamfight's ended by the time you've teleported in.
And now Freeze just used the Super Mega Death Rocket to check that Pulse weren't doing Baron, so NIP clearly don't feel like they're ahead anymore, which is kind of a big tell here that they're not feeling too confident in this game after that fight went so far against them. They obviously will have to clear the waves in the middle lane, but they do have to be careful that they don't get pushed in too many lanes.
Yeah, and Freeze's Super Mega Death Rocket is already almost off cooldown, 15 seconds to go. It's on just 60 seconds at this stage in the game, so it can be used as a kind of a throwaway ultimate if they just want to check that pit. And Zoro's cleave is even better for that objective. This will be angering the Baron, and even if Zoro gets way ahead of his team, he's not going to be nuked down. Miffy, however, will be taking a spear. Utilizing Molten Shield, going to give him a little bit more resistances, but again, we just start the dance, and those spears are going to start mounting up.
Those spears will start doing quite a bit of damage if they're not careful. Pulse look like they want to go aggressive. Not too sure on this one because, as we've said, the fights in the jungle and outside of the base kind of do favor NIP here.
Yeah, diving on a single person is basically the opposite of what Pulse want to be doing. They want to chip away at them. We saw exactly why with the Dragon fight earlier. They want to chip away and make sure they're at low enough HP where they can secure a good team fight. NIP can just intervention a single target. It looks like they might just be conceding Baron and seeing what they can do in the middle lane, see if they can find themselves a bigger objective. But at the moment, just 2 members taking Baron.
Yeah, here comes the Super Mega Death Rockets. They'll know it's being done. Now here comes the answer here from NIP. They haven't reacted in time to stop the Baron, and now a Baroned up Pulse will start to look to push into the base, and I have to feel that NIP knew that was happening.
Yeah, and it definitely was telegraphed. Miffy's going to go for the engage, though. Huge chip is over the wall. Kickers jumps in. There's the intervention. Joki's in response. A support for the jungler is not the trade that they want to do so far, but Pulse are still heading in. They land the kill onto Amin. Perfect spears from NIQ. And that should be enough to win themselves that team fight. That one spear has picked up that team fight and the inhibitor.
And we talked about how the team fights would go for NIP outside of the base, but again, they traded pretty much unfavorably in that team fight. That speeded so much and they re-engaged.
They've gone for round 2, and the damage from Walleye's Boomerang Blade instantly deletes Nukeduck. Despite all his farm, despite all his items, he's not strong enough, and 3-6 another spear. This Nidalee is really paying off for the team of Pulse.
Pulse don't feel like they can push in here on their own. They do have a big wave pushing in towards them in the bottom lane. That's not the biggest threat on their mind, but Baron was quite a difference maker in that. Pulse had extra damage during that team fight, and NIP just couldn't quite get the damage off. Armin actually falling pretty quickly in that team fight. You can see he's building towards a Guardian Angel, and in the last couple of fights he's actually done not a lot but die, which is because of how flimsy he is as a champion on Kha'Zix. So he's got to get that Guardian Angel so that once he dies once, he'll have a reset available, hopefully from the rest of his team picking up kills.
That's what they're going to have to hope for, because there's 2 team fights in a row that have not swung NIP's way. There's kind of losing the momentum of this game. The tempo has definitely been offset. The team of Pulse are just looking stronger. At the point where Pulse can push out of their base and then be able to just siege openly against NIP, that's the stage where NIP are going to find it difficult to do anything at all, because their anti-siege is significantly weaker than the team of Pulse. You're basically just looking for those rockets from Freeze to clear it out.
And now, while Nukeduck has done a great job of farming up in this game, you can see 426 CS. Over on the other side, 760 is nearly at the same point in builds. Nukeduck has a completed build, 6 items have been finished here. Whereas you look at Nukeduck, let's check his gold. Sorry, you look at 760 right now, he's got just over 1,000 gold, so with that needlessly large rod is very nearly completed into the next item. I have a feeling that it will likely be Sonya's, but here comes the fight.
They're going to attempt the engage. Kicker's already down to half. Super Mega Death Rocket connects onto Kickers, but he is way too tanky for that to become too relevant. And that upfront burst still was quite scary from Nukeduck, and that's on a fairly low cooldown. Just the Lich Bane and the Reckoning is going to be enough. But if they can land it onto a squishier target, that's the kind of start of a fight that they want.
And now, even though they got quite a lot of damage down onto Kikis, they actually missed the Tibbers engage there from Mithy. So Flash wasn't available for that either, so it's not like they used 2 big cooldowns. Flash is about a quarter of the way back. But Elendix still had Solar Flare available, so they didn't want to continue that engage and get caught out like they have been a couple of times here. So Pulse are going to do a smart thing of rotating down to the bottom lane for another tower at these inhibitors. Will they be able to get it, though?
Well, Sivir is hurting quite a lot now, even onto Zoro, who has been itemizing more magic resist because of the threats. He even has the Thornmail on top of 2 other armor items. But Walleye is just cutting straight through that. Mid lane is going to be cleared out by Nukeduck. He's still max items, but he's the easiest or the best member for clearing these ones down. And even Pulse are just finding it quite difficult to siege. Even in this confined environment, Zoro is keeping himself in the front of the team, tanking up those spears, but they are slowly chipping away at this turret. Amin takes another spear and the Boomerang Blade. He's going to have to go back to base. This might be the push that Pulse want. Indeed, it will be. We'll see if they can re-engage. Kickers takes a lot of damage. The re-engage, the Sultan battery comes out, but will be taken down swiftly. And Lendix lands a perfect Solar Flare onto 2. Zoro is still trying to stick to them like glue. He should be able to grind down the Lendix and look for another kill on top of that. The Banshee's Veil will stop NIQ from being chased down, but Jokies might not be so lucky. Meanwhile, in the mid lane, Amin is good to go, but that'll be the end of that fight.
And that was without Armin, and the spears just were not landing for 760. He just couldn't get the damage out in that fight. The Flash Tibbers was available, they landed on a member or two of Pulse, and that's the teamfight potential from NIP, that even with a man down, they were still able to output a lot of damage when they could avoid the damage from 760. So if NIP can get more teamfights like that, they're good to go, but NIP have already been caught out a couple of times. That's a small victory there. And their inhibitor has come back up, so now NIP can look to be a little bit more adventurous playing out on the map.
So we saw this a little bit at like the preseason stress, where we were saying, well, games go on for quite a long time, but like a lot of the team compositions are very good on the defensive, and that's what we're seeing right here. They're really good at anti-sieging, they're really good at fighting them when the enemy is coming to them. And as a result, we're not seeing NIP being able to push. We saw that before, even with that colossal advantage. And we're not able to see Pulse push, even with a map advantage, but not the gold advantage.
Yeah, and there's a big difference between map advantage and gold advantage that I think a lot of people overlook. A lot of people when watching, sometimes included myself, you look at a gold difference and you're like, okay, they've got like 5-6k gold, they're well ahead. Now, you can have a gold lead, but if you don't have control of key areas on the map, it almost doesn't matter how far ahead you are. Obviously, there's a point where if you're 10-15k gold, then you can take fights anywhere and it's fine. But if you have control of the Baron, your own jungle, even when behind, you can start making plays that can really turn the game. And it's such an important factor of oracles being removed that it's almost impossible for an offensive team to clear out every single ward from a defensive team. That's why we're seeing these longer and longer games, because defensive teams are far more likely to make smarter engagement choices.
Yeah, there's always going to be a blind spot for NIP, even when they're on the offensive, so they can't just walk wherever they like and just sit in the bush and wait for them to come to them, because it's not going to happen. 20 seconds left on the Baron. This will be the next time that we see these teams go head-to-head, because at the moment it's just kind of friendly taps before they go for anything else. So 10 seconds left, and we will have to see one team force the issue.
Yeah, no, we'll see. Flash not available for Mithy. Tibbers is available, however. But so many Banshees Veils out on the team of Pulse that they have to pick their engagements very carefully here to NIP. If they end up burning Tibbers or useful engage tools on a Banshees Veiled member of Pulse, then that really does turn the engagement away from their favor.
Also, something that I just saw, Freeze has picked up a blue trinket.
Ah. Okay.
Interesting, yeah. So we were talking before about them having like blind spots and it being difficult when you're on the offensive to, counter ward everywhere on the map. But if they're just hiding in the jungle somewhere or trying to play the defensive game, blue trinket comes out and you've got yourself a mini clairvoyance. NIP are going to try and rush down the Baron. They do a lot of damage, but they find themselves right in the pit. They're all confined. Those two carriers off to the side. They've taken it down already. They will have the advantage. Alens has jumped in. Kickers is well away from the rest of his team and going toe-to-toe with Freeze. He cannot win this fight. He will be taken down. Nuke Duck has fallen in the meanwhile. They're still in this Baron pit, but a shutdown comes for Amin. He's still got the Guardian Angel. He still hasn't dropped once, and Jokeys is forced to back off. 2-for-1 trade. This might be the push that NIP were looking for.
And that was the experience of NIP paying off, the fight preparation there. As soon as they saw the engage coming from Pulse, they split so that they could never be hit by Solar Flare on more than 2 members. They lined up in a line, some of them outside of the Baron pit, and that was excellent preparation ahead of that team fight. Armin got dropped very low, so couldn't go fully aggressive, but Kikis was met by a Banshee's Veil as he tried to go aggressive on Freeze, and it meant that he just ended up doing no damage, put himself out of position and couldn't peel.
Finally, NIP have cracked that shell of Pulse, gets excited, pushed forward, and Kickers, even though he is rather tanky, can't sustain through all of that burst. Nuke Duck's still in the death chamber, so there's 2 members of Pulse eSports, but finally the inhibitor and some headway has been made by Ninjas in Pyjamas.
And having Baron is going to give their Siege even more potential now. They struggled earlier with the Siege, but with the ability to have that extra damage and extra regeneration, they're going to take less damage as they start to push in. You can see already that Pulse are trying to turn the damage against NIP by the fact that 2 of their tankier members have Thorn Mails to try and offset a lot of the damage that Kha'Zix, Kale, and Jinx will be doing here. But it's just not going to be too much reflection damage right now. They've got to be careful that NIP don't just hard engage on them, because those Thorn Mails won't do too much against instant burst.
Yeah, and not from AP damage either. That's not how it works.
Exactly.
But in these lanes now, when NIP decide to push a different lane, bottom lane or top lane, then Pulse are going to find problems and find themselves in a predicament that they'll need someone else to clear the way, because they'll have to have Woolite clearing out the mid wave. But the super minion wave, they need someone else for, and no one else on that team is very good at clearing out minions very quickly. So by having that member down, or that member away from that fight, that might open up an opportunity for NIP. Just a little more headway that they can make. But that's the problem they had earlier. While the full man stack of Pulse were underneath that turret, they weren't getting anywhere with it.
Yeah, that's one of those times where I was midpoint looking at cooldowns and that, and was looking at Kayle and was like, Thornmail protects from Kayle. No, Thornmail doesn't protect from Kayle. Apologies. I meant Jinx. That's why I stumbled over my words.
Well, it protects for some of it, but it's not going to protect from all of that damage. Super Mega Death Rocket finishes off a Lendix. They're going to go for this fight on the turret. No one has finished it off just yet. Jokers is already disintegrated. Their front line is non-existent, and Kickers has dived so deep. This is very well the game. Inhibitor goes down, the second inhibitor for NIP, and finally this huge swing of momentum. 53 minutes in, Zoro Zero is so tanky. They will be taking the first Nexus turret, the second, and Amin, flashy plays, but that will be the Nexus falling the first game. That's only the first game of this best of 3 between NIP and Pulse.
What a game. That was back and forth from both teams, and both teams looking very strong here, and good to see our Challenger series is getting even more highly contested here as we head further through the tournament.
Absolutely, really fun to watch both of these teams go to head-to-head. But anyway, guys, we will jump to a quick commercial break, and when we get back, we'll be in the second game of this best of 3. First game went to NIP.